Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Space for Life. And I know I say about every episode that this is a particularly special one, but this really is a particularly special one. Not only because of my guest, who you're going to have a blast kind of getting to know and hear his story, Joel Suggs, but also because this podcast represents um, kind of big news on my part of something new that I want to let you in on that I'm really, really excited about. A little bit of a new venture for me. And before we jump into all of the story with Joel, I want to tell you a little bit about this. I'm beginning kind of in parallel to Space for Life, a new podcast, as well as new posts and blogs and some other things a little bit down the line called Links for Life. And Links for Life, if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you know that I keep on bringing in at almost an obnoxious level my love and my passion for golf. Well, Links for Life is like the intersection between Space for Life and my love and passion of golf. It's my way of bringing, all of the stories and lessons that are so core to me at living a life well, all within the context of the game of golf. And so I know a lot of people here may not be golfers. And so you may not be people who are going to get as excited as I am about Links for Life. But a lot of us know golfers. And to that extent, this may be a podcast that would really interest you to a great extent. So my guest today is a person that helped take these mullings that I've now had for years about starting something like this and brought it right to the forefront. Joel is someone that, as a podcaster, I also love listening to podcasts. And one of the realms of podcasts that I love to listen to is a lot of golf podcasts. Well, I came across a golf podcast called My Par Train, and Joel was the guest on this podcast. And he taught about his perspective and framework for thinking about the game of golf. And I was absolutely captivated by this. And I listened and I went, oh, this is exactly what I've been looking for a long time. And I began to think about and mull about the things that he shared on that podcast. Well, to my surprise, within about a week of listening to that podcast, Joel randomly emails me and asks if I would be interested in having him as a guest on Space for Life, which I went, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. This was the guy I just listened to on this. And then as we began to get to know one another, I saw all of these paths converging in what I would consider a God-ordained way. That God was saying, now this thing that you've been thinking about for so long, now is the time to start this. And so soon in the very soon upcoming weeks, I'll tell you a little bit more about how to find Links for Life. And Joel and I will be doing episodes, and I have some other great guests lined up. So I'm really grateful for getting to know Joel. I'm so excited about this venture of Links for Life, which I will continue to be doing Space for Life through all of this. And this is just about, for me, is about as good as life gets. So anyway, I'm very excited about this. All of that to lead into introducing to you Joel Suggs, who is a new friend. And we've had quite a few lengthy discussions about life and about golf. And he's already helping me in, very specific ways with thinking about my golf game. But we particularly just had a fun time talking about life and about the things that matter to us. And I think the things that matter to those who listen to Space for Life. So I want to introduce Joel Suggs. Joel has been a PGA master teacher, which is a big deal in terms of what that means. Since 1987, he's been a PGA master teacher. He's also the author of Golf Success Before Every Round, and his latest new book, which is kind of almost a workbook type, My Golf Mirror. And Joel has been married for 31 years to Darlene, and his dad to Taylor and Ellie. And you can just find that he's a delightful person that, of course, loves golf like I do, but just has such a fervor for life in general. So I'm so excited to, Joel, have you on Space for Life and have you share your story and a little bit about your life. So welcome, Joel.
Thank you very, very much, Tommy. I really appreciate it.
Well, we've had a good time getting to know one another, and it's one of those that I truly feel it's just the beginning of getting to know one another. And so I'm looking forward, of course, to this podcast and conversations and perhaps future podcasts together. But I'm actually looking forward to more time face to face in hopefully the very near future, though. So why don't you just begin? Tell us a little bit about your story that has led to this, long career in golf, but I know transcends and goes way beyond the game of golf. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Thanks again for having me on. I've seen probably about 5 or 6 of the podcasts on YouTube. So I've enjoyed them quite a bit because I'm really not too much of a podcast guy, but I've enjoyed seeing, like I said, about 4 or 5 or 6 of the episodes of Space for Life. So I really enjoyed it quite a bit.
Great.
So you kind of said my vitals, I guess, is what you would say. But yeah, Darlene's my saintly wife, and Taylor, our son, is 27, and Ellie, our daughter, is 25. And I guess a big part of it, right, is our parents, right, where we come from. So, and it relates to my career because I'm a third generation golf professional. So my grandpa Johnny was a golf professional in Atlanta, and he built courses, and he was a greenskeeper also. So he kind of wore 3 hats. And then his wife, my grandma, ran the shop, ran the restaurant. And then his 2 kids, my dad and my aunt, grew up working on the golf course and playing golf and caddying. And they both ended up in the golf industry their whole lives. And then I became a golf professional in 1987. I actually became a master professional in 2000.
Okay.
So, because you have to be a PGA member for at least 10 years. So I've enjoyed doing it. I've just given lessons all day long, every day since 1992. And so that'll keep you entertained, all day long, pretty much. Keep giving golf lessons all day long. So, especially to good-natured people. So
Yeah.
it's been a real joy, a blessing, a very much a fortunate aspect to be able to do this for so long. But I had I guess everybody thinks they're kind of out of the ordinary growing up generally, but I went to 13 different schools growing up, and mom had 3 divorces. So I was kind of away from my golf side of the family, my dad's side of the family, most of my time growing up. But in those 13 different schools, I lived in everything from the inner city of Cincinnati and Chicago to rural Montana without running water, electricity, nor plumbing. So it's been a great education growing up all around the country, seeing so many different types of people. And so I'm very thankful for the way it's gone now. And I'm glad to be able to just visit with you, Tommy, about these things. Because again, I've enjoyed your perspective on things a lot the last several months, getting to know you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Would you consider your childhood to have been a difficult one?
I'm 64 years old now, Tommy. When we were kids, we didn't know it was difficult. That's what you hear most people say, right? Like our parents would say, well, I didn't know it was the Depression. Nobody told me the Depression until I went to college or something, you know what I mean? Until after the war or something like that. So if it had to be a yes or no answer, I would definitely say yes. But in another sense, it just, you roll with the punches. I mean, I went to a different school every year from 6th grade through 11th grade, so I don't know. I've never really wanted to psychoanalyze it. I guarantee you it was, like I said, I learned a ton.
Yeah.
for better or for worse, baby, I learned a ton. You living in the inner city. I did not know running water came out of faucets when I moved to Montana. I didn't realize that. But when we dug the hole for the cistern, about 6 feet deep with our shovels, my little brother and me and my first stepfather, the three of us, my mom actually helped a little too, it was about as deep as the ceiling in this room, about 9 feet deep. And they brought this big stone thing in, this on the back of a truck. It was a cistern. They put it in the ground and then they filled it with water out of a different truck. I'm like, oh, I guess water doesn't come out of faucets. It actually has to come from somewhere. There are pipes underneath all these buildings. So that's how much of a city kid I was at age
Wow.
16. So
Yeah.
I would tend to say not yes or not no. I mean, it just was. It was just growing up. And we all have our, to me, very unique little stories. Each one of us is, God's absolute miracle. And so I enjoy listening to other people. That's why I've enjoyed your podcasts. I enjoy listening to other people and hearing where each and every individual comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. What in those years I imagine hearing you speak both, your parents' situation and this changing schools practically basically on a yearly basis were really formative for you. What else would you say was kind of formative to making you who you are today?
And, I think again, we were always taught in school that we're all equal and we shouldn't judge each other by the color of our skin. That what's more important is the content of our character. And I just took that hook, line, and sinker, and I thought, man, we're all equal. And so I think that's been a big undergirding of my whole life is that like I said, each one of us is created by God. Each one of us starts out equal, and we're a human being. We're not a horse. We're not an elephant. We're a human being. We're a soul. And we have unlimited potential. And so moving around all those different cities, all those different type neighborhoods, like I said, everything from the inner city to lower middle class neighborhoods to middle class neighborhoods to rural Montana, where we didn't even have utilities, in a log house that we were building. It just taught me that everybody's interesting, you know, and
Yeah.
and everybody has a story, and it keeps me entertained to just get to know people each and every day.
Which I've taken my share of golf lessons over the years, um, although not a ton, but the common denominator that I've seen in golf teachers, particularly good professionals, is they really have an interest in the people that they're coaching. That's so much more of a big deal than it is actually changing their swing or something. They just find a certain peace and satisfaction in just experiencing people and the learning process. And I appreciate that because there's less of that hyper drive, I guess, in that kind of context than I see in a lot of the rest of culture. A lot, in some senses, maybe a little bit more contentment. But so I appreciate kind of the way you express. You just really enjoy all sorts of different kinds of people. So
Like you said, not everybody that listens to us here today or tonight, I'm sure is a golfer. I kid people. They say, "Oh, I don't play golf, Joel," and I say, "Oh, well, that's why you're a happy person." So, but my aunt's one of the Ladies Hall of Famers, and I took our son. Of course, she knew our son throughout his life. But when he was about 14 or 15, he really seemed to want to start getting more serious. I said, "Taylor, buddy, why don't we go down to St. Augustine and just kind of have an audience with Aunt Sis? I'd like to just let's go sit in the room with her, stay 1, 2, 3 days, however long you want. And I just want her to tell you what she did to become the Hall of Famer she is. And if you want to really become a good player, to pick her brain a little bit." And he was about, like I said, probably about 13 or 14, maybe. And he said, "Okay, Daddy, let's do that." So we went down there. And one of the questions I asked Aunt Sis, I said, "Aunt Sis, if you had to tell Taylor to emulate a certain tour player, who would it be?" And she didn't hesitate. She said, "Byron Nelson." And I said, "Why?" And she kind of looked and she goes, "He's just such a gentleman." And then I remember reading in Byron's book, one of Byron's books, or maybe he wrote an introduction for Harvey Pinnock's books, one of his. He wrote this nice introduction, or some paragraphs of writing he did. He said, and then the other thing that Harvey and I have in common is we both love people more than golf.
Wow. I love that. I love that. You know,
I'm like,
I think that's at the core, one of the reasons that I'm so attracted to golf is that it does not exclusively, but it often attracts people who are good people who, want to live a good life. And I thoroughly enjoy that, as well as, all of the challenges of the game. So there's so many things, I guess, specifically of the why I love golf. So but that's neat to hear. So two questions I guess I have. One is just as you begin to express yourself and express kind of your belief in, that we're all equal, regardless of color or socioeconomic status or anything like that, because we were created by a creator. Did you grow up in a religious household?
uh, that's another question that I would have a hard time with a yes and a no both. So, um,
That's my job to ask hard questions.
so if I had to say one or the other, I would say no. But interestingly, in about 1973, my mom joined a religious order that was communal.
Oh, wow.
So about at the beginning of my eighth grade, my big brother was starting college. My little brother was 2 years behind me in school. We moved into a commune that was sanctioned by the World Council of Churches, and was here in the inner city of Cincinnati. And so in eighth, ninth, and 10th grade, we lived in a communal setting with other people that were in this same religious order. And unlike a religious order that's just men or just women, they called this a family order, so that your whole family moved into this commune. And so every morning we'd have breakfast together in this particular religious house in Cincinnati. This organization had what they called a religious house in most every major city at that time in the country, and several others around the world. But yeah, every morning, there were about 30 of us that lived in the house, 25 or 30 people total, probably about 10 kids, 10 of which were kids, school age kids, like myself and my little brother. We would cook breakfast and eat breakfast together and sing some songs and say a prayer and had a little liturgy. And then we would go to public school, and then we'd come home and we'd have some kind of meetings or some kind of functions in the evening. And of course, we ate our dinner together. Of course, we ate lunch at school. So that was eighth grade. Then ninth grade, I won't give you more details, but the next couple of years were in other cities. And I did not live with my mom nor my then first stepfather. So it was interesting. So I never really got an appreciation for the Bible. I was the typical kid growing up in our society, pretty much a nihilist and, agnostic slash atheist slash nihilist, just believe the typical stuff you would hear on TV about religion and about God and about Jesus. And but that changed when a friend of mine got me to think a little more deeply about things when I was in college. And then I would say, since then, I don't like to call myself religious at all. It's a clammy word to me, but I've definitely believed that God exists and Jesus is his son, and that Jesus is a really cool dude. And I think he's the nicest, most rugged, humble, tough dude ever to live. And I've enjoyed trying to imitate him for about 40 some years, but growing up, I surely didn't have that idea. I thought it
Yeah.
was a fable.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fable somebody made up, and
I
I
like
didn't
the
think
way
God
you
existed.
I like the way you express that because um, I think I probably have a little bit of a radar up for anyone who would comfortably um, identify themselves as religious. Even though faith is such an important part of my life, there is, as you say, something a little wonky about the word religious. And I think certainly my uh, conviction, and it sounds like yours also, is that faith is something that is far, far bigger, greater, magnificent than being religious. So anyway, I like the way you express that, and it's amazing. I think having talked to so many people through this podcast and outside of this, the variety of unique ways that God finds His way into people's lives, and here your growing up sounds like it was pretty tumultuous, erratic. It was not one that would normally, per se, put you in the path uh, of faith orientation, and yet God found His way, which is just the way it is, I think, so often. So anyway, I appreciate that. That's neat to hear. And although I knew from our previous conversations that was, part of who you are, it's great to hear kind of that background.
And
So
interestingly, again, because of these topics you and I enjoy so much, it was a friend who got me to start considering the Bible. He says, Joel, how come you reject the words of Jesus when you've never read them? You say you're an open-minded person. I said, that's a great question, Roger. I don't like to reject things I haven't considered, I haven't checked out. And he was a golf friend. And again, the older I've gotten, like I said, the whole idea, well, God did this or God did that, has always been kind of weird to me. God is the subject of a sentence. I say, I got the idea of God being the subject of a sentence. He created the earth. He created Tommy. He created Joel. I'm like, okay, got that. But when they say God helped us win many people in Caesarea, I'm like, I don't see that. I don't understand I don't know what that looks like. And but the older I've gotten, I'm finally starting to learn a little bit about what the verb of that subject means when
mm,
God is the subject of that sentence, Tommy. So I'm going to use that word tumultuous next time somebody asks me about my childhood.
yeah,
I never used
yeah.
that one before. Erratic too, baby. I like that. You gave me two multisyllabic words there to use, Tommy. I appreciate it.
I guess that's what it sounds like from the outside. You lived it and it seemed normal to you. It doesn't sound normal to me. Yeah, that's great. Well, so I know you had golf in your family, but it's a different thing to choose that than for your own path. What led you in your younger days, and I guess through college, to then decide, this thing that's in my family, my tumultuous family, is now what I want to be pursuing with my life.
Uh, Again, just growing up as a normal kid, I feel like in certain ways anyway, but just the normal mindset of everybody growing up in our society and Western American culture in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Um, I just thought, you go to college, get a job, stuff like that. So I just kind of got a normal job out of college. Never really, because I never really wanted to be anything. There was just never anything I wanted to do. I didn't know of any job that I really wanted. And then some very intensely personal things happened. I won't go into them right now, but that caused me to just totally reevaluate my life a little bit like you've described, Tommy, for you about 30 years ago. This one happened for me about 40 years ago, to really evaluate. And as I was thinking, studying my Bible, praying hard, talking to friends, I thought, is there anything I really wanted? There's nothing I've ever wanted to do. And then after several weeks, a couple months, it seems, all of a sudden it popped in my head. I'm like, hold it, no, think about this, Joel. Keep thinking hard here, man. Joel, I think when you were a tiny little boy one time, you wanted to be a golf pro. Oh, maybe there is something I wanted to do one time. I wanted to grow up and be something, you know? And I thought, yeah, I think I did want that when I was a little kid. And I thought, well, I can't be a golf pro. It would kill my spirituality. I wouldn't be able to do all the things I do with all my church friends now that I'm 26 years old. And I thought, well, give it a whirl. And through my research, I concluded that Paul was much more of a tent maker than a preacher. So you're more scholarly than me when it comes to degrees, Tommy. So you might tell me I'm wrong here, but at least that's been the conclusion I drew about 40 years ago. that Paul was much more of a tent maker than a preacher in the sense that he earned his living by making tents, and the preaching is what he just did for fun.
Yeah,
And
that
so
not to interrupt, but it's something that a lot of people may not totally be aware of, that the Apostle Paul, who wrote, many, many books in the New Testament, that he had a job that paid money for him, and he was a tent maker, um, along with, or really side by side with, all that he did in working and teaching and preaching and everything. And, who knows which one took more time. We know which one mattered more to him, but he did both. Whereas, we don't normally think of that as a viable way of thinking about how to live our lives. And so it's interesting that it comes back to you to be a way of understanding that both could be true.
that's so you think I'm kind of correct in my conclusion?
Absolutely.
Good. I'm glad I haven't been wrong for 40 years. So 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 uh, so I thought, I wonder if I could get a job where I could kind of make my own schedule, kind of be like Paul, make my money at tent making, but then still have fun doing all these things with my friends about enjoying living life with God. And so and I thought, when I was a little kid, I think I did want to be a golf pro. And so, of course, it was easy for me to find people in the golf industry that had been friends of mine for about 5 or 10 years and or friends of my family for decades. And so I was able to land a job in Cincinnati as a golf pro. I left my sales position and have been working as a golf pro since 87, and full time has just given lessons since 92. So that's kind of how the confluence of, the interest in spiritual matters and God himself and Jesus and life being fun, life being what we want it to be. When I had some pretty tough times now that I think about it, pretty miserable as a kid at certain points. And I thought, life maybe might actually get to be enjoyable, Joel. It could be. Maybe you could actually do what you like for a living. I hear very few people tell me they love their job. And so I've been very thankful, Tommy, all these years now to be able to say I get to, be in the golf industry like my dad and my aunt and my grandpa were. And our son is too, by the way. He's a fourth
Yeah.
generation golf professional.
Well, that's really neat to hear. And I've heard you um, talk about your aunt, aunt, right? The Hall of Famer.
My aunt, yeah, indeed.
Yes. I, and that's a really big deal. There are not many people, I mean, we're talking about more in the handful range that get to the point that that they are Hall of Famers within their particular sport. So that's quite a legacy.
I mentioned something else about that. Probably about 10 years ago, it dawned on me, it's like, I don't have a single autograph, because different students would come back and show me autographs they got at tournaments or whatever. And I'd say, oh, that's neat, and and about 10 years ago, it dawned on me, I was like, I don't have a single autograph. Do I need to go get some autographs? And I thought, well, why? I'm 50 years old. Why have I not done it for 50 years up to now? I'm like, and I started thinking about, why haven't I done that? And one of the things I concluded after pondering it for a few weeks, I think it's because of our famous aunt, and she is the coolest lady in the world. All right. But at the same time, I'm afraid she's in our family, for her, and so, and so, you know, I'm like, I think I've never gotten an autograph because I just know, again, everybody's equal. That I know my aunt, she's the coolest lady in the world. Everybody speaks highly of her and very well respected in the whole golf industry. And I know she has problems, at times I've been one of them, and so
Yeah.
and I think that's why I've never gotten an autograph, is I just think we're all equal. And I just don't have this thing. And then now with celebrities kind of being more accessible in terms of the internet, I think that's proven all the more that, yeah, everybody's equal. And anybody who wants to get too long for their cot or too big for their britches is probably going to find out that they ain't that important. They're not that special. Jack Nicklaus likes to say, he says, boy, the great thing about the internet, it all happened after all the dumb things we did when we were kids, for people his age.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I would mention that in terms of just She is such a cool lady. She passed away a few years ago. I'm looking at a couple of photos of her right now here in my studio. So, uh, and my dad was a great fella. My dad's a great fella. My grandma and grandpa are great folks. And on the other side too, my mom's a great lady. She passed away about 4 years ago, and her parents were great people. So, it kind of dovetails with that thing I mentioned earlier that for some reason, from a very early age, I've just always been fascinated pretty much by each individual, that we're all equal. We all have a story. We're all coming from somewhere, and we each have a lot of value.
What a great perspective. And how amazing, just as I'm hearing your story from the outside, that these two almost conflicting paths or things can be true at the same time, that uh, a lot of your life and growing up was very difficult with a lot of imperfection and difficult things. And yet you now at this later stage, describe how great your dad was and your mom and your aunt, and how God brings us to the point that hopefully both can be true at the same time. That we make a lot of mistakes and we fall, and uh, bad things can happen, and yet life can still be good. So that's great. I appreciate that a lot.
And other thing, if I can interrupt again, another aspect of that, I've like never been bored my entire life. And I'm concluding as I've gotten older, I think it's probably because in fact, I'm just thinking this now, I've been able to spend so much time by myself throughout my whole life and quite often when I was a kid, it was tough times. I was miserable when I was by myself. But, it sure has given me a lot of time to think. And I've never been bored. I'm like, people say I'm bored. I'm like, I keep myself entertained all day long with all the stuff going on here. There's a great line in a Monty Python flick where at one point the fellow says, is a noise in my head bothering you? So I have all
Yeah.
kinds of things. I'm never bored. And I think that in terms of space for life, space to breathe, I guess looking back at it now, Tommy, I would say I've just had a lot of time to do that. And now consciously over the last 30 years, I've cut out time for that, more space to live, space to breathe. So that, again, I think that's one of the reasons you and I have enjoyed visiting with each other so much the last several months.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed that is not the norm that I run across or see within our society is that as you and I have had conversations, um, now many, over the last several months, never once have they been rushed. Never once have we been looking at our watches, trying to quickly get everything said that we needed to say. We've had, delightful, unrushed time to get to know one another and to talk about whatever it is that the moment brought. And I think we're missing so much of that in our society. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've been drawn to one another, because we're like-minded about the value and the delightfulness of not being rushed and having space for life and space for relationships, and at the same time, space to live a life of purpose. So I love that. Kind of as we wrap up, I guess I'd say two things. To me, your story in and of itself is a lesson. It's a lesson that that here you've been doing the same thing, teaching golf lessons for what, 30, exclusively for 30 some years. Something that a lot of people would say, how could he do that same thing? And yet you are expressing you've never been bored. You love what you're doing. And um, I think I think it really expresses what's apparent to me is a piece that's coming from within you. What are just one or two of uh, the lessons that you think the game of golf uniquely has to offer to those who play golf.
Oh, so now we're talking to the golfers in the crowd.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. For people
Um,
who wonder, why would people play this stupid game?
were you talking about kind of serious life lessons
Yeah,
in terms of space to breathe?
yeah, life lessons. Yeah.
Um, Honesty. If there's one thing, if you got the guts, because it's a miserable game on the ego. It's good for the soul. Very humbling. A friend of mine, one of my friends who again tries to follow Christ, he would, and a lot of guys do this when they play golf. Y'all, for those of you who don't know this, all the golfers know this. They hit a shot. Oh, I sliced it. Hit another shot. Oh, I hooked it. You know, immediately after impact. Oh, I can't believe that one went left. And so after hearing this for a couple different weeks, a few summers ago, and I'd known this guy 40 years. We've been dear friends. He was in my wedding. I finally said to him, hey, Steve, when we're playing golf, you don't have to confess your sins. And he looked at me and says, what are you talking about, Joel? I said, hey, buddy, we're all seeing your mistakes. You don't have to tell us what you just did. We know you sliced it, Steve. We're not Stevie Wonder here. I mean, we're not blind. I mean, so now what you do with that bad shot is going to be determined by the kind of person you are. You know what I mean? I mean, it's that simple. Wherever you go, there you are, according to the old country song. So some of us will be happy that it's sliced over there. I learned my mistake. I'm going to figure this shot out and I'm going to go back to the range and practice it. And others will be, I can't believe I sliced it. I can't believe I sliced it. And we're just going to keep denying the fact that we sliced it. Tommy, I know, golfers that slice it their whole life and they still aim down the middle. So apparently that person has a problem with honesty with themselves or understanding the facts. I mean, I'm not saying they're morally off or bad. There's the dots are not getting connected. And in golf, the best players, that's why quite often golfers are pretty funny dudes and girls. Because if they're a good golfer, man, they have learned to not be surprised at whatever mistakes they might make. So I think to answer your question, the biggest kind of life lesson that can be learned from golf, if you're open-minded to it, is enjoyable honesty.
Well, boy, that is so good. And I do think, and it's one of the reasons I get excited about talking about this Links for Life. I think that has such relevance and parallel to some of the fundamental issues that we as human beings deal with. And we all know uh, the people, the other people that uh, just are not self-aware, that don't realize and are unwilling to admit what seems obvious to everyone else around them. They are constantly slicing their relationships. They're hooking when they do work, and they don't even see it. And that honesty, which does go parallel with humility, is such a fundamental to living life well and living it with contentment. And you and I both know so many golfers across every different level of competence who, whether they're, shoot 100 or they shoot 70, they're going to be miserable. They're going to be unhappy. And at the core, it's because of that absence of honesty and absence of humility. And there is such a core life lesson uh, to be learned, whether we learn it through golf or we learn it through, the circumstances of life. So I appreciate that. I love that. Well, Joel, I'm excited to have this conversation, and I'm particularly excited to have future conversations that we'll share, perhaps on Space for Life again, certainly on Links for Life, and I hope a lot face to face, because I've already seen, as you've been coaching me towards a higher degree of self-awareness in what I'm doing, on a golf course than I've ever been challenged to have. And so that's been really helpful, and it gives me a lot of excitement uh, about the year ahead for me in golf and in life. So anyway, it's great to have this conversation. Thanks so much. If anybody's interested in connecting with you just to hear more or have a conversation with you or about golf, where would they connect with you?
I'd say my YouTube channel,
Your
Joel Suggs,
YouTube channel?
Joel Suggs PGA,
Joel Suggs PGA.
or Amazon. Do you think people have heard of Amazon?
I think they have.
Go get the book, right?
Yeah.
You can find me there, I guess.
It took me 2 whole days to read because I was nonstop.
Ah,
It had a very different perspective, and I've read probably hundreds of golf books. It had a very different perspective, and I love different perspectives. So it was great. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to a lot more of new perspectives going forward.
well,
So
thank you. You're very kind.
thanks everybody for tuning into this, and we'll tell you more about Links for Life as that gets launched over the next few weeks. Thank you, Joel, for being a part of this, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tommy.